Liberal-leaning pop culture sites like Slate and the Daily Beast used to be regular fixtures, part of my daily read. The writers could be witty and sharp, and, with most being a few years younger than me, it provided a last threadbare tether to my rapidly fading youth. But I've drifted away from those pop culture outlets, and for one key reason. They won't distinguish between grounded, relatable, progressive ideals on the one hand, and the strident, prissy excesses of identity politics on the other. They will celebrate dynamic and stylish people moving the needle, which is good, and herald the breaking down of barriers and overdue progress, which is also good. But when it comes to identity politics, they won't rein in or call out the more indulgent impulses, and won't assess and then cut loose the flakier elements, controversies, or contrived and jarring activist language, which is bad. Liberal discourse ought to reflect the great liberal traditions of the Enlightenment, with its motto, Dare to Know. This meant forming an intellectual and ideological core, and then testing and hardening that core by willingly reading varied and even opposing texts. With the mindset being, you could disregard the majority of those opposing texts, but appreciate and then assimilate a few elements of them. What this means is, instead of reading someone like Jordan Peterson, for example, cringing at his slicked back hair and silk waistcoats and lame analogies about lobsters, but nonetheless finding 10% of his writing worth engaging with, modern pop culture liberalism is strict in determining if someone is completely in or out, which is bad. The monolithic defense of liberalism, never allowing a single little rip in the big tent, means liberal op-ed writers celebrate diversity and inclusivity in entertainment, which is good, but never draw any limits, never make any shrewd distinctions, and never question whether any casting choices, for the sake of diversity, are incongruous or incoherent or are creating a weird relativism, leading to preposterous situations where the real-life historical white Anne Boleyn or an 11th century Viking noblewoman can be played by black actresses, which is indulgent, precious, and ahistorical. For literally everyone in liberal pop culture media to be breezily permissive and passive about this is bad. Another issue with these progressive pop culture scribes is their unwillingness to ever call out bullshit when film studios or streaming companies battle to contend with intense pushback and want to try to maintain the narrative by doing contrived damage control. Like the painful, semi-scripted, cobbled-together pseudo-panel of douches they threw into chairs after the new Lord of the Rings show looked like it was being panned too aggressively online. Despite the cynical contrivance, the grating superficiality, the brain-dead repartee, the sleazy desperation, the tone-deaf activist entitlement overlaid with thick, sticky layers of corporate grime, no one in the whole realm of liberal pop culture commentary batted an eyelid or called it out, which is bad. Next, liberal pop culture op-ed writers overemphasize the language which undermines the vision. The progressive vision of empowerment of minorities, which is good, is undermined by tone-deaf, clunky language, and then stubbornly doubled down on, even if it's shown, on balance, to be negatively received or counterproductive, be it critical race theory or defund the police, which is bad. No pop culture liberal op-ed writers, across the board, ever comprehend there can be a massive gulf and hugely missed opportunities between the vision, which is good, and the prissy, priggish, and flaky excesses of language to advance the goal, which is bad. Next, they are always playing with or welcoming implications that masculine friendships in entertainment have homoerotic overtones. This pertly playful trope involves highlighting examples of strong male friendship and bonding, which is good, and then implying homoerotic overtones, which has annoying suggestions about masculine behavior, masculine-friendly intimacy, and, if you boil it down, applies dodgy notions of socially constructed masculinity, and takes notions of sexual and gender fluidity and projects those notions with annoying persistence onto characters in entertainment, which is bad. Next, they sit around waiting for demographics to change and fail to see the cause and effect. The reasoning here has always been that progressive identity politics is more or less a demographics waiting game, where minorities will rise to a significant enough proportion to tip the scales and ensure progressive ideals and priorities. This leads to a recurring pattern. Op-ed writers talk about the inevitability of Texas and Florida turning blue, and then the same op-ed writers tie knots in their handkerchiefs watching Steve Kornacki at the political map in his signature slacks till the early hours, trying to figure out why Texas, in particular, remains stubbornly red. They will then fret for a month or two about whether the left's socialist elements and flakier, more strident identity politics has alienated Latinos, before lapsing lazily back into their daydreams of the Lone Star State surely going blue next time around, and losing interest in drawing any cause and effect with alienating culture war flaky excesses. Next, they argue the semantics and not the premise. In a typical scenario, way back in the Virginia governor's race, the Republicans, in their brutally on-the-nose, repetitive, caustic way, made critical race theory front and center. They didn't care less about the detail. They just created a simple premise that teaching kids that America is racist undermines American history and America itself, and then just attacked that premise. The Democrats, in their flat-footed, dismally guileless way, instead of batting it away with relatable, succinct wit, went ponderously into the semantics, trying to inform hard-working parents without much time to pay attention that critical race theory is primarily taught at college level and had been mischaracterized, and the liberal pop culture media did this too, focusing on the semantics rather than leaping all over the premise, which is bad. Goodbye, Slate, the Daily Beast, the Atlantic, and the New Republic. We had some good times together, but we just don't see eye to eye anymore, and it's time we parted ways.